Your journey in the hospital is never complete until you meet a nurse. A nurse will always be there to nurse you. A nurse will always be there to care for you. In every hospital, any care clinic, health center, you will definitely find the services of a nurse. Oh yeah. Hi everyone, I am Oma, your very sweetheart on radio. Welcome to my podcast. It is Oma Diary 360, where we get to talk about everything as I see as a journalist. It promises to be enriching and inciting as well. So we've actually been on this journey of talking about nurses and what it entails to become a nurse, considering the fact that we have quite a lot of bad things to say about nurses, especially nurses that practice in Nigeria. But I've come to realize that if someone actually sent me a message telling me that it is the same thing all over the world, that a good person is a good person and a bad person is a bad person. So on the last episode of this podcast, this particular series where we are talking about nurses, we profiled nurse NK, who works in a facility in the UK, and she shared with us her experiences as a nurse. She said a lot of things about what nurses go through. So we're continuing on this particular edition of what nurses go through. Once again, who is a nurse? What does it mean to be a nurse? A nursing profession assumes responsibility for the continuous care of the sick, the injured, the disabled, and the dying. Nursing is also responsible for encouraging the health of individuals, families, and communities in medical and community settings. Nurses are actively involved in healthcare research, management, policy, deliberations, and patient advocacy. Always assume independent responsibility for providing primary health care and specialty services to individuals, families, and communities. Of course, professional nurses work both independently and in collaboration with other healthcare professionals. We can go on and on and on and on and on of who a nurse is and what's expected of a nurse. We always have a lot of expectations on what a nurse should be and should not be. But what's the history of nursing? Although the origins of nursing predate to the mid-19th century, the history of professional nursing traditionally begins with Florence Nightingale. Yeah, Nightingale, the well-educated daughter of a wealthy British parents, defied social conventions and decided to become a nurse. The nursing of strangers, either in hospitals or in their homes, was not then seen as a respectable career for well-bred ladies who, if they wished to nurse, were expected to do so only for sick family and intimate friends. In a radical departure from these views, Nightingale believed that well-educated women using scientific principles and informed education about healthy lifestyles could dramatically improve the care of sick patients. She believed that nursing provided an ideal independent calling full of intellectual and social freedom for women who at that time had few other career options. In 1854, Nightingale had the opportunity to test her beliefs during Britain's Crimean War. Newspaper stories reporting that sick and wounded Russian soldiers nursed by religious orders fared much better than British soldiers inflamed public opinion. In response, the British government asked Nightingale to take a small group of nurses to the military hospital at Scutari. Of course, within days of their arrival, Nightingale and her nurses had reorganized the barracks hospital in accordance with 19th century science. Walls were scrubbed for sanitation, windows opened for ventilation, nourishing food prepared and served, and medications and treatment efficiently administered. Within weeks, death rate plummeted. Soldiers were no longer sickened by infectious diseases arising from poor sanitary conditions. Within months, a grateful public knew of the work of the lady with the lamp, who made nightly rounds comforting the sick and wounded. By the end of the 19th century, The entire Western world shared Nightingale's belief in the worth of educated nurses. Amazing story. Now let's continue. Nightingale's achievements overshadowed other ways to nurse the sick. For centuries, most nursing of the sick had taken place at home and had been the responsibility of families, friends, and respected community members with reputations as effective healers. During epidemics such as cholera, typhus, and smallpox, men took on active nursing roles. For example, Stephen Girard, a wealthy French-born banker, won the hearts of citizens of his adopted city of Philadelphia for his courageous and compassionate nursing of the victims of the 1793 yellow fever epidemic. As urbanization and industrialization spread, those without families to care for them found themselves in hospitals where the quality of nursing care varied enormously. Some patients received excellent care. Women from religious nursing orders were particularly known for the quality of the nursing care they provided in the hospitals they established. Other hospitals depended on recovering patients or hired men and women for the nursing care of patients. Sometimes this care was excellent, other times it was deplorable, and the unreliability of hospital-based nursing care became a particular problem by the late 19th century, when changes in medical practices and treatment required competent nurses. The convergence of hospitals' needs, physicians' wishes, and women's desire for meaningful work led to a new healthcare professional, the trained nurse. Amazing! Really, how trained are these nurses? Do they take into cognizance? Now, if you look at the story of Florence Nightingale, it's such an amazing and inspiring story of how she went in, saw the need of the people, and as a result of her intervention with her and other nurses, death rate reduced within the soldiers. Now, that's amazing. Of course, as a nurse, what do nurses do? How do they do their work? What are the challenges they face in their work? We continue with speaking with nurses who have shared with us the challenges they face in the line of their duties. On this particular podcast, we will look at Nurse Diogo. She's also a practicing nurse and she practices outside of Nigeria. And of course, she shares with us amazing insights and very staggering revelations of what nurses go through in the course of treating people and in the course of their profession. Kindly take a listen and I'll return after now. Stay.
Make you talk my pain away. Talk.
Okay, the nurses face a wide range of hazards in our daily work. Of course, hazards like physical hazard, the chemical, biological, psychological, and a whole lot of them. Like every day, you talk about the physical hazards. We are always at risk of suffering from one physical injury, due to the nature of the work. Sometimes you might require to lift a heavy patient just to sit them up, or sometimes it can be equipment, and then you might be exposed to fall, slips, trips. I can remember a lot of times that I want to fall down because the floor might be wet, and then the workspace is always clustered with oxygen cylinder wires and all that. So, and then sometimes you may be at risk of violence from the patient or even their family members. They can be so, sometimes you see them, they might be angry and then they get back at you. So these are things we face. And then you talk about the chemical hazard. These ones, we are always at risk of being exposed to chemicals in the workplace, even the cleaning agent, disinfectants, medications, exposure to chemicals that may cause skin irritation. Even there are some you inhale that might give you the risk of respiratory problems, and then sometimes health issues. And then some medications are not smelling nice and all that. So, and then we talk about the biological hazards. We come in contact with infectious diseases, and when caring for the patient, this is what we always experience. Then you have to talk about patient that might expose you to HIV/AIDS, hepatitis, and all infectious diseases, especially that of hepatitis B and C. So we nurses are always at risk of contracting all these diseases, including airborne illnesses such as tuberculosis, flu. Yeah, I remember a lot of times that after working in the care homes and then caring for old people with COVID, respiratory issues, you come back, you are down. And then you talk about the psychological hazards. We experience a lot of psychological stress due to the demand of the work. Sometimes you have to stay for long hours. You are dealing with difficult patients and families, and then sometimes someone might die too, and then you are kind of stressed out, like after everything you've done. So this person didn't make it. So though we do receive proper training on how to go about all this, like on training on how to lift equipment and lift the patient, safety while you are walk, when you know when to walk and when not to walk, even how to manage and add a balance, and how to put on protective equipment to protect yourself and also protect the patient. Regardless how all these things are being implemented, you can't still say there are no risk to the job. So sometimes the patients don't even appreciate you, and then you have to deal with it.
She too fine, she gets stars, her voice now dies. My baby, oh my sweet at the radio.
Oh, wow. In her own words, sometimes the patients don't even appreciate you. But you have to deal with it because, it is your duty to nurse, to care, and to ensure that the patient recovers. Just like Florence Nightingale. Amazing thoughts, amazing submissions from Nurse Diogo. She's actually a practicing nurse in the UK, outside of this country, Nigeria. And it's really been quite amazing because, she talked about training, she talked about nurses being trained to handle the equipment, to protect themselves, well-being, because it is someone that is well that can help the other person become well. And remember, as a nurse, people come to the hospital because they are sick. If people are okay, if people are well, there won't be any need for the hospital. And maybe as nurses decide to take on this all-important profession, maybe you should always remember Florence Nightingale, her sacrifices, how her intervention brought about a reduction in the death of soldiers and in infectious diseases within the camp of soldiers. Wow, that is quite sacrificial. That is quite inspiring. I'm even inspired. And as a patient, it's always important that we try as much as possible to appreciate these nurses who go out of their ways to ensure that patients are well taken care of. Of course, thank you so much for joining me today on this particular podcast. Of course, let me have your thoughts. What do you have to say? What do you think? Have you had an experience with the nurses in the hospital? Share with us. And I look forward to having you again in my next podcast. I love you.